Of an exit plan is usually reserved for business strategy or military operations. It implies a calculated, preconceived method of withdrawal. But when Dr. Robin Tim So uses the term, he is not talking about liquidation or retreat. He is speaking about mortality. He suggests that on a subconscious level, many of us formulate an exit plan from life itself when the mechanical nature of existence becomes too tedious. It is a provocative, perhaps unsettling idea that a terminal diagnosis might answer a subconscious request to leave the party.
It frames the patient not as a victim of biological chaos, but as an active participant in their own longevity. This is the central tension in Dr. So's narrative. We are looking at a case study of a man who, by all conventional medical standards, should not be here. Diagnosed with stage 4 non-small cell lung cancer in July 2020, he faced a prognosis that typically measures survival in months. Yet nearly 4 years later, he is not only alive, but operating with what he describes as a renewed vitality. His journey is a radical collision of modern oncology, ancient metabolic theories, and highly controversial alternative therapies.
And we have to be precise about what that collision looks like. This isn't a story of someone rejecting Western medicine entirely to meditate on a mountain. Dr. So is an acupuncturist with 40 years of experience in natural therapies. Yet, he utilized immunotherapy and targeted radiation. However, he argues those were merely the fire extinguishers. The rebuilding of the house, so to speak, required something the hospital couldn't provide. He pivoted to a strict carnivore diet, engaged in prolonged water fasting, and adopted esoteric practices like frequency healing and urine therapy.
The nutritional shift alone represents a massive departure from his cultural and professional background. Dr. So is a third-generation Australian Chinese man. His life was built on rice for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. In traditional Chinese medicine, grains are often viewed as essential for stomach qi. For him to encounter Dr. Sean Baker and the carnivore community was, as he puts it, a shock to the system. He had to dismantle a lifetime of dietary conditioning to accept the premise that vegetables and complex carbohydrates might be hindering his recovery rather than aiding it.
That dismantling process seems to hinge on the work of Professor Thomas Seyfried. We hear Seyfried's name come up constantly in these discussions regarding metabolic therapies. The standard oncological view is that cancer is a genetic disease, a result of DNA mutations running wild. Seyfried argues that cancer is primarily a metabolic disease, specifically a mitochondrial dysfunction. If you view cancer as a metabolic problem, the solution shifts from poisoning the DNA to starving the cells of their fuel.
Exactly. Seyfried's research suggests that while cancer cells have many mutations, they all share a common weakness. They are fermenters. They require vast amounts of glucose and often glutamine to survive because their respiration is broken. They cannot effectively burn ketones for fuel. Dr. So latched onto this. If he could lower his blood glucose enough, he effectively puts the cancer under metabolic stress. This is where the carnivore diet enters the equation. By removing all carbohydrates, you force the body into ketosis. But Dr. So took it a step further with a 21-day water fast.
21 days on water alone is medically significant. Most people struggle to skip lunch. But physiologically, what is happening during that 3-week window that would impact a tumor burden? He mentions the 14th day as a turning point.
He is referencing the concept of deep autophagy. Autophagy translates literally to self-eating. It is the body's cellular recycling process. When nutrient intake drops to zero, the body must find fuel. It starts by burning stored fat, but deep into a fast, the body begins to scavenge inefficient or damaged cells for protein recycling. Seyfried and others have hypothesized that during extended therapeutic fasting, the body may turn on tumor cells as a fuel source because they are biologically expensive to maintain. Dr. So describes a surge of energy and joy at day 14, which he interprets as his body finally gaining the upper hand, turning the tables on the tumor.
We should clarify that while the biological mechanism of autophagy is well documented, it won the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2016. The specific claim that a 21-day fast will devour stage 4 lung tumors is not standard of care. It is a high-stakes intervention. However, Dr. So combines this with what he calls the medical profession's support. He acknowledges that the immunotherapy stabilized him for 2 years, but when the funding for that ran out, a harsh reality of the Australian medical system for certain treatments, he felt he was left out on a limb.
That timeline is critical. The immunotherapy provided the stability, but the funding cap forced his hand. He didn't want chemotherapy. This desperation, combined with his research mindset, led him to the more esoteric edges of alternative health. This is where we move from the metabolic science of Seyfried to the frequency theories of Royal Rife. Dr. So utilizes a spooky 2 machine, which is a modern iteration of the Rife machine, for 4 hours a day.
This is where the skepticism usually kicks in for the average listener. Royal Rife was an inventor in the 1930s who claimed that all diseases have a specific electromagnetic frequency, and that by broadcasting a mortal oscillatory rate, you could shatter pathogens like a glass singer shattering a wine glass. The medical establishment has largely dismissed this as pseudoscience for nearly a century. How does Dr. So reconcile this with his clinical background?
He bridges it through the concept of quantum healing. As an acupuncturist, he is already operating within a paradigm that views the body as an energetic system, qi, rather than just a biochemical machine. For him, the leap from acupuncture meridians to Rife frequencies isn't that far. He views the suppression of Rife's work as similar to the suppression of dietary truths, a corruption meant to keep the masses dependent on pharmaceuticals. He mentioned specifically that he believes we have a sixth sense or psychic capacity, and he trusted his intuition when a friend offered him the machine.
It is a cumulative approach. He calls it a kitchen sink method. He isn't relying on one magic bullet. He's stacking the deck. Zero-carb diet to starve the glucose, fasting to induce autophagy, targeted radiation to hit the visible spots, and then these daily protocols of frequency and, perhaps most controversially, urine therapy.
Urine therapy, or Shivambu as it is known in Ayurvedic tradition, is a massive psychological hurdle for the modern Western mind. It involves the ingestion or topical application of one's own urine. Proponents argue it contains stem cells, antigens, and hormones that the body has excreted but can reabsorb to stimulate the immune system, essentially a personalized auto-vaccine. Dr. Zo views the disgust reaction as a form of social conditioning. He points out that we all floated in amniotic fluid, which is largely urine, in the womb. To him, it is the ultimate closed-loop recycling system for healing. He admits even his friends and family find these choices difficult to digest. He mentions the resistance from his Asian family, noting they are non-forgiving in their critique. There is a sense of isolation in his journey. He wears the crazy label as a badge of honor now. But let's look at the results. He underwent radiation in August 2023. What is his current status according to his scans?
His 6-month PET scan post-radiation showed a marked reduction. The oncologist noted that the distinction between scar tissue, collateral damage from the radiation, and active cancer was indistinguishable. This is a crucial detail. In the world of stage 4 cancer, no evidence of disease or NED is the holy grail, but it is rarely declared immediately. It is a waiting game. Dr. So believes he has bought himself credit in the disease bank. He isn't claiming a miracle cure in the sense that he can go back to his old life. He views his new lifestyle as the maintenance cost for staying alive.
That maintenance cost is high. No rice, no noodles, no fruit, no vegetables. Just meat, eggs, and water. He describes his daily intake. Intermittent fasting with an 18-hour window, then a lunch of beef patties and 4 eggs, followed by a steak and 4 more eggs for dinner. That is 8 eggs a day.
And he specifically mentions the texture.
He eats the eggs boiled or sunny side up to vary the experience, but the nutritional profile remains flat and consistent. This supports the metabolic theory. By keeping insulin low and stable, he's attempting to remove the growth signals that cancer cells rely on. It's worth noting the influence of Dr. Sean O'Mara here as well, who focuses on visceral fat. Dr. Soar realized that despite being healthy, he had accumulated visceral fat, the dangerous fat packed around the organs. The fasting and carnivore diet stripped that away, which he believes reduced the systemic inflammation fueling the cancer.
The psychological shift he describes is just as rigorous as the diet. He speaks about the death process versus the life process. He categorizes alcohol and thrill-seeking as part of the death process. He has become, in his words, less of a thrill seeker and more of a researcher. This brings us back to that exit plan concept. He admits that in his late 50s, he was bored. He felt mechanical. He suggests that this spiritual malaise created the opening for the disease.
This is a polarizing view because it borders on victim blaming if misunderstood, but Dr. So is framing it as empowerment. If his boredom and subconscious desire to leave the party contributed to the illness, then his conscious decision to stay longer is the antidote. He explicitly states that on the night of his diagnosis, he decided to choose later, not sooner. He believes this psychic decision instructed his biology to respond to the treatments. It is a holistic integration. The mind issues the command, the diet removes the interference, the fasting cleans the debris, and the radiation kills the immediate threat.
He also touches on the limitations of his own profession. He has been an acupuncturist since 1980, member number 49 in Australia, he notes with pride. But he admits to having harbored a 5% doubt about whether the body could truly heal itself of something this magnitude. He wondered if he was just conning people into feeling better psychosomatically. This journey seems to have been his own proof of concept. He erased his own doubt by becoming his own patient.
And that 5% doubt is now down to 0.5%. He mentions that he will never be 100% certain because that breeds complacency. He keeps a fraction of a percent of doubt to keep himself disciplined. If he believes he is invincibly cured, he might reach for the rice or the alcohol. That tiny sliver of fear is actually a functional tool for adherence. He has accepted that he cannot go backward. He tried tomato sauce once and got sick. His microbiome has shifted so drastically that he is now physiologically committed to this path.
It is interesting that he doesn't try to convert people aggressively. When friends ask, he shares his story, but he acknowledges the immense resistance. He mentions vegans who end up with prostate cancer and struggle to pivot. It highlights how deeply diet is tied to identity. For Dr. So, the identity of stage 4 cancer patient was one he refused to accept, so he had to shed the identity of rice-eating acupuncturist to survive it.
That identity shift is the core takeaway. He didn't just change what he ate, he changed who he was. He went from a bored, mechanical practitioner to a researcher engaged in a daily battle for his own biology. He spends 4 hours a day with his machines and his research. That is a part-time job. His survival is his new occupation.
The skepticism of the medical establishment is something he navigates by simply ignoring it. He says he never lets a doctor be his clairvoyant. If they start predicting his death, he cuts them off. This requires a level of stubbornness that might be necessary for survival in outlier cases. He isn't looking for their validation. He is looking for their technology, the scans, and the radiation, while reserving the philosophical and nutritional management for himself.
It is a utilitarian relationship with modern medicine. Use the tools that work, discard the prognosis that doesn't. He is waiting for a CT scan in May to see if he can get that indistinguishable verdict again. But regardless of the scan, he has regained a quality of life, no joint pain, high energy, mental clarity, that he argues is worth the price of admission, even if that price is giving up the culinary traditions of his ancestors.
Dr. Robin Timso's story is an N of 1 experiment, a single data point in a vast and complex field. It challenges us to consider how much agency we truly have over our metabolic destiny, and whether the exit plan is something we can rewrite. If you know someone navigating the complexities of a difficult diagnosis or someone interested in the metabolic theory of health, please send this episode their way.